Hello there and welcome to MCJ Sports. My name is Marco Yerkovich.
I'm Easton Nelson.
And I'm Spencer Allgood.
All right, today we'll be discussing whether the committee got the 4 teams right, game locations, possible expansion, and a whole lot more.
And before we begin, I'd just like to remind everyone to please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment down below.
And let's hope that Notre Dame loses.
All right, so let's get into this one. So, speaking of Notre Dame and kind of the playoff in general, so did they get the 4 teams right? It was Alabama at 1, Clemson at 2, Notre Dame at 3, and Oklahoma at 4.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they're the best 4 teams, but they're the right teams to put in this. I think Georgia was the second or third best team in the country, but they couldn't beat Alabama, so they didn't deserve to make it. I think Oklahoma beating Texas after that was their one loss, I think it pretty much solidified it for them. So,
yeah, I agree with you in many of those respects, but if we are going to put Georgia in, the only logical team to take out is Notre Dame. Would you do it?
no, they're undefeated and Georgia's lost. I mean, the way I see it is Georgia might have had the hardest strength of schedule in the country, but they also lost to the 2 best teams they played.
I think if Georgia only loses to LSU, which, by the way, they lost by 20, if they lose that game by a touchdown and they lose to Alabama only by a touchdown, I think they probably get in over Notre Dame.
I think it was perfect, to me at least. I mean, this Alabama-Oklahoma game, I think it's going to be really fun to watch. It could be pretty high scoring, although Alabama might be able to study the Oklahoma offense. But, I mean,
It's
Notre
not
Dame,
possible. You can't
Kyler,
stop them.
Kyler Murray, that's all I got to say.
They're too good. Well, I think, actually, I think the Alabama-Oklahoma game will be closer in score than the Clemson-Notre Dame game.
You
I think Clemson's going to blow out the Irish.
By 30.
I don't know.
30.
Maybe.
I like,
That's actually
I
probably
like, I like
pretty
Notre
close.
Dame. So
I dislike them very much.
they're not my
I don't
favorite
think
team.
they're that good.
Their
but
mascot is what? An Irish?
He's
What is
just
it?
a
An
dude,
Irish.
yeah.
A fighting Irish. Wearing, what, a suit?
Yeah, they couldn't have, like, a lot of schools, their mascots are like humans, but they still have, like, the big, like, mascot guy, you know?
At least the Celtics depiction of the Irish, he's got enough clout to have a cane and a pipe.
Clout.
I mean, sure.
What is the fighting Irish dude have? He's super ugly and he's put his fists up like
He's got a
ready to
hat.
rumble.
He's got a hat. He's got the shoes.
They
Why are
don't
we
He has
having
like a
this
vest,
conversation
doesn't
right
he?
now?
He has a vest with like 4-leaf
because I
clovers on
think
it.
the fact that
Listen, we won't have to see him for long because Clemson is going to rout the Irish.
by 30.
I think the Alabama-Oklahoma game is probably going to be closer than a lot of people think.
You think Oklahoma has a chance to win?
I think
No, they have
Oklahoma-
no chance to
Yes,
win.
yes, they
However,
do.
I
their
think they do.
offense is
everyone
good
was
enough to
saying-
keep them in the game for a while.
Everyone was saying that Georgia didn't have a chance to win, and look what happened there.
Yeah.
I think the 3 teams in the country that have a chance to beat Alabama is Oklahoma because of the power of their offense, Clemson because they're a well-rounded team, and Georgia because, go Dogs.
I think it's going to be whoever scores last. I mean,
less.
You think it's gonna
or
be that
last?
close?
Last.
What?
You think it's going to be that close?
Yeah,
I do,
see it.
honestly.
That's the same with
Kyler
every
Murray, and I know that they haven't done it yet, but Oklahoma's defense, I think they might step up and be able to create some turnovers or just play solid.
they
I know we
can't-
haven't seen it
They
yet.
can't
but
step any farther down, and that is a fact.
Yeah.
The only way to go is up when you hit rock bottom.
Yeah,
It's
Oklahoma's
facts.
defense was 125th in the month of November. But
That's
I'll give
great.
it to them. They scored 2 defensive touchdowns against West Virginia, and they made enough stops against Texas to give their offense breathing room, and then had the safety that clinched the game or basically pulled them away from Texas. So Oklahoma's defense has made plays, and they're going to have to make a lot more against Alabama to stay in it. So we're talking about the 4 correct teams, but obviously there's plenty of teams that deserve to be in this discussion. So does that, should we expand the playoff to allow those teams like the Georgias and the Ohio
In
States
the UCF.
and the UCFs? And
I think we should, but then there's going to be the argument that we should expand it to even more because the 9, 10, 11, 12 teams deserve to get in, and then even if we expand it more than that, it's just going to keep going. And, I mean, it's a good idea to do 8, I think, but any more than that I think is too much.
yeah, I think there's plenty of ways to expand the playoff. I think 6 teams could be interesting, but I think the ideal amount is 8. I think any more, and as you said, it kind of gets into, wow, this is kind of a bit extra. But the fact that you have 5 Power 5 conferences, I think 8 is a perfect number. And I think there's different ways to do it. But Spencer, what do you think?
I think 16 is the perfect number for a playoff, especially in football. Do I think that's ever going to happen? No. So
6 or 16?
16.
Really?
Yes. I mean, look at it. High school football does 16. D3 does 16. D2 does 16. Yeah, it's a lot of games, but it's the best way to figure out who's actually the best team.
I think it'd be fun to watch.
It would be fun to watch,
teams.
but then it would feel a lot of those first round games would feel insignificant. But
Not
I
necessarily.
don't know. I feel like 16 is just too much. I feel like there's gonna have to be 3 and 4 loss teams in that.
Okay,
And
but anything can happen.
They
That's
just
like
don't
saying
deserve it though.
the 16 versus 1 seed games in the NCAA tournament for basketball are useless. But look what
That's
happened
different
last year.
because they have
How is that
conference
different?
represent.
One out of how many,
So are you
though?
telling me that with 16 teams, are you gonna have to guarantee group of 5 teams an
Yeah,
automatic bid?
I think that is automatically what's going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen. I think it'd be more interesting.
So you'd have 10 auto bids and then 6 at large.
Yeah,
I mean, I feel like theoretically, if we had the time to do that and the resources and the want, that could happen and that should happen. But in what I think should happen and what I think will happen, you're gonna have 8 teams, and a lot of people's argument against expansion is that it kind of nullifies the conference championship games. It actually you're punished for playing the conference championship game sometimes. The Big Ten champion has only made it in once. A non-champion has made it in twice for the Big Ten. So what I think should happen is you should be forced to play 9 to 10 conference games so you can play as many of the teams in your conference as possible. You declare a regular season conference winner. You have no conference champion, and that conference winner gets one of the 5 auto bids for the Power 5. Then you have one group of 5, and then you have 2 Power 5 at-larges. I feel like that's the way to go. People are saying the quarterfinals undermine the conference championships, but if you get rid of them, they essentially become that extra game.
Yeah, I'd like to see that because I think we'd see more upsets, but it would just be so much more entertaining. I mean, seeing a low seed beat a higher seed, whoever it is. I mean, it would just be really fun to watch. Although, I think some people would argue that they're playing too many games. Then it depends how many rounds it goes
I don't think that
into.
would be too many.
Yeah.
Also, another way to make it more close to home. So some conferences, especially the smaller conferences, play their conference championship games at the team with the better records school. They played the Mountain West Championship at Boise State. But, for instance, the Pac-12, they played in Levi Stadium, right? I think in Santa Clara. And they just get low attendance for what the stadium has capacity for. So I think a way of remedying that is to have the quarterfinal matchups be hosted by the higher ranked seeds. So, for instance, with this ranking, you'd have Alabama at 1 and UCF at 8, and Alabama would host in Tuscaloosa. Clemson would host in Clemson against Michigan. Then I think the semifinal and national championship should have set locations, but I feel like a good way of bringing the schools into it more is to have those quarterfinals on location.
I think that's why the NFL does it the way they do it. They do everything up until the Super Bowl at the better ranked team's stadium, and I think that makes it a lot more interesting.
So you think even the semifinals should be at the school?
I think if it is expanded, then that would make it more interesting. I just don't like watching
some
games at
stake in
neutral
it then, yeah.
stadiums. Watching games at neutral stadiums is like half the fun as the games normally are.
Yeah, you you eliminate the student section because they can't really travel as well
and
as
they're all broke
older
from paying
fans.
their
Exactly.
student debts.
That's a whole nother can of worms we're not going to open quite yet. Although the Taco Bell student section does do a good job of getting those fans cheap tickets. This is not a sponsored video. Taco Bell, though, if you want to sponsor us, let
Yes.
us know.
I like Taco Bell. So.
Yeah, it's a great restaurant. Great
Quality
institution.
food.
It's
Quality
good.
food. 5-star.
What about a 4 for $4 from Wendy's?
You know, I don't
I
mind.
haven't had Wendy's in a while.
We got one right by our school, but I don't go out for
I get it
lunch,
3
so.
to 4 times a week. So
That's
I guess
impressive.
we're not in the same boat there.
Well, they call it the Taco Bell student section, not the Wendy's student
And
section.
that's a shame.
Yeah. Well, I honestly think going back to it though, I see that. I only in my mind when I made this, I envisioned only the quarterfinals, but now that you bring it up about the NFL, I like the idea of having the high ranked seed host a semifinal. I think that it makes it more special in my opinion. And then of course you have to have the championship game at a neutral location. Even though last year it literally ended up in Georgia's backyard.
I hate when that happens. When like the team that's in whatever the championship or whatever round of the playoffs it is that they get a city right next to them or in their city. It's kind of unfair, I guess you could say, because they get the majority of the crowd. But
Well, that's going to happen a lot because
Yeah.
college football has like 7 or 8 favorite stadiums.
Mhm.
They have the Rose Bowl in Pasadena. They have
Mercedes-Benz.
Mercedes-Benz in Atlanta,
Superdome,
Superdome, AT&T in Dallas.
Falcons. I can't remember what it's
It's
called.
Mercedes-Benz in Atlanta.
yeah.
They have
I thought that was
Hard Rock
Seacrest
Stadium
Field
in
in
Miami.
Lincoln, Nebraska.
Sure. Hard Rock in Miami. It seems they play a lot of games down south. And University of Phoenix Stadium in Glendale, Arizona.
Great
That's
question.
really
Why is it in Glendale if it's the University of Phoenix?
why? Yeah, I don't know.
That's a great question.
That's actually a legitimate question that I don't know the world has the answers to quite yet. But yeah,
Maybe sometime.
I think they could diversify where the stadiums are. I understand like there's not a lot of dome stadiums, but for instance, they have U.S. Bank Stadium in Minneapolis, Minnesota. It's a big city,
It's nice.
Twin City, corporate hub. I think they should move one of those New Year's Six bowl games up to Minneapolis. I feel like Seattle could host a game. Detroit has the arena, which is a pretty good spot. But Lucas Oil
Bring
in
it to Lincoln.
Indianapolis. Sure.
Seacrest Field is ready.
Memorial Stadium has plenty of seats. People would watch.
Yeah.
But yeah, any other places you guys think they could take bowl games?
No, I think
Yankees.
I think you named 50% of
Yankee
the
Stadium.
stadiums.
Honestly,
they ever
yeah.
play in Boston? I think they do. They
Yeah.
played a
Yeah, they could play at
Fenway.
Gillette.
The reason
Oh,
Fenway,
I think the
too?
reason they
Yeah.
like going to those places, they like going places where it's warm.
Yeah,
Even like places like the Rose Bowl. it's warm
Indoor.
there. Yeah.
and warm. That's really where they like it. Yeah, I mean, I see that, but it does kind of bring in the conversation some like geographic advantages.
Well, the SEC
the ACC and
championship
ACC
is
have.
it's in the Georgia Dome every single
Mhm.
year. And
well, isn't the Georgia Dome
yeah.
down now? Didn't they?
It's the Mercedes-Benz.
Well,
Okay,
yeah,
okay.
it's
But
still
it's
in
in
Atlanta.
Atlanta.
yeah.
But honestly, but talking about this kind of these geographic disadvantages, if you make it the higher seed hosting in the 8-team playoff, if they host the quarterfinal and the semifinal, you can eliminate that as much as possible up until the national championship game, which if that opens up the opportunity for them to move it around through 7 or 8 stadiums on a cycle, and then if it does happen that let's say Georgia makes it to the national title game the year they have it at Mercedes-Benz, then it's just a coincidence. It's not premeditated at all. But I think the 8-team playoff is the way to go. I can see some people seeing the 6-team playoff as the way to go.
I didn't even think of 6-team playoff teams.
give the
that would
first
be
2
really
teams
fun,
a
though.
bye, which is a
Yeah.
real incentive.
I just didn't think that they would ever do that.
But then I
6
don't-
or 16?
6.
6 really? I'd say 8 or 16.
You're saying 6. Easton's saying 16.
No, I'm a total proponent for 8 teams.
I'd say
think-
8, but I think 16
I think it's
would be
8 or
fun.
bust.
16 would be fun.
But some people are saying 6 and then 8. I don't love that, but if it has to happen to get us to 8, I'm okay with being at 6 for a few years. Just the only thing with 6 is you can't really have the automatic bids then, like you have in the 8-team. But I think the more important thing about going to 8 teams is you eliminate the conference championship games, which already have lost meaning because of the playoff. But now, now I think it doesn't matter anymore because you have those 4 extra games that are crucial at a national level instead of a regional level, as the conference titles have really lost meaning. I mean, this year we had a 5-loss Pitt, 4-loss Northwestern, a 4-loss, 3 or 4-loss Utah in there.
Washington.
Washington had 3
Washington ticket?
losses. They're so irrelevant at this
Yeah.
point. I think we may as well just expand the playoff, eliminate the conference title games.
And I
Then you
think it'd
got
be
8
interesting for
teams.
Georgia to actually play Alabama for once in the regular season because they never end up playing each other in the
Well,
regular season.
that's another thing about what you could set up regulations through the FBS that you have to play. For instance, they could say you have to play 10 conference games.
I think that would make it a lot more interesting.
Yeah, more teams are playing more talented teams. Also in this, because we're getting rid of conference championships in my idea, guess what you also get rid of? These pesky divisions that are unbalanced, unnecessary geographically, and just plain stupid and set up bad conference championship games.
Mm-hmm. What do you think we should do then? Just
Just-
put the good teams and then the
Yeah,
bad
I
teams?
think it should just be like a table like they do in soccer where it's
Exactly.
just you play as close to everyone in the conference as you can, and then by the end of the season, you just have like who's the best team, and then that team gets an automatic bid to the playoff.
Exactly. That's totally how they should do it. Obviously, with some of the bigger conferences, they have 14 teams. Still, if you play 10 games, you're playing as close to as many as you can. You're going to get an accurate representation of who the best team is. You send that team as your representative from the conference, and if you have a second team that is really good, then they probably will get an at-large bid. You're not losing out on teams that don't deserve to be in, and I feel like you're getting a more equal representation. You still keep that automatic group of 5 like they do for the New Year's 6, but now into the 8-team playoff. So, you'd still get UCF in this year. I feel like this is just the most civil way to go about this expansion. I feel like it makes the most sense.
Yeah, what would the 8 be right now if we did it with like the automatic bid for the 5 conference championships?
Yeah,
to largest,
and
then
something
obviously
to
UCF
also
would get the
point
last
out,
spot.
the 5 automatic bids don't necessarily mean they'll be the top 5 teams.
Yeah.
Right now, if I personally ranked my top 8, without care for like how the seeding would impact, teams playing each other, I'd have Alabama 1, Clemson 2, I'd have
Georgia at 3.
I'd have
honestly.
Oklahoma 3, Georgia 4, Notre Dame 5, and then probably UCF 6, Michigan 7, and then
Well, Michigan.
I think I'd swap
you
Michigan.
You already
and
had
UCF.
2 at-larges technically because Georgia and Notre Dame.
well,
'cause Notre
see, but
Dame's not
that's
in
the
conference.
problem. I would change. One, this would force Notre Dame to have to probably join a
the
conference. They'd
conference.
probably join the ACC. But I see the problem with this is now we're picking conference champions from people that shouldn't have been conference champions.
Like Washington.
Right, Washington. I guess I'd have to put them in there at 8 because Georgia and Notre Dame would technically be my at-larges. But unfortunately, we're not getting the right conference champions right now.
Playing Washington State playing in the snow. You don't think that's an accurate representation of who the better team is?
Exactly, but
I got that game right.
yeah, you did.
Good
You
for
did.
you. Good for you. Just wait till I get the Ravens game right this weekend.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't think so.
I feel
I don't
like
know.
what you're saying is right about this year, but as soon as we use my method, when we get the best teams,
The
this won't be a
Yurkovich.
problem.
The Yurkovich algorithm.
Yeah, we'll use
do you
it.
think they will actually expand? Like,
I think they'll expand. I don't think
Eventually
they'll
they'll
get rid of
need to.
conference championship games.
Yeah, but I feel like if you're going to expand to the quarterfinals, the conference championship games, not only are they overkill, but they could potentially damage your conference. Let's say, just in some crazy theoretical world, you have a 4-loss Utah and a 1-loss or 2-loss Washington that deserves to be in, but Utah doesn't. But instead of sending Washington in automatically from the Pac-12, they play and lose to Utah, in a close game. They're out of the playoffs. It's and both teams are out of the playoffs. Pac-12 is out as they've been for the past few years. I feel like if we take the best team from every conference, we get that automatic representation. Then to clean up those extra spots, you get the at-large bids, and then you represent the group of 5. I feel like it's just the best way to go about it. You'll have less of these terrible teams competing in unnecessary games.
There's one option we have not discussed yet, and that is formatting it exactly like the basketball tournament. 64 schools.
68 teams.
68 teams with the play-in games. 4 divisions, 1 through 16. Give it a month, or it'd probably end up being 3 months of football. That would be unreal.
That
Although
would be really fun.
I don't
but
think the upset potential in football is quite the same as in
it's
basketball.
really not. Although you never know, crazy things can happen. Shout out to Old Dominion beating Virginia Tech. But
What about the Virginia game last year?
yeah, I mean, you never know. But that I feel like that is so. I mean, we're already thinking that 16 is off the table. 64 is complete lunacy.
It would
let's
just
do
be
120.
You have to do 128.
You don't have to. No one
Yeah,
ever
you
did.
do.
no,
No
I
one
mean,
ever made
unless you
that.
want to have a bunch of weird systems of buys. If you want to straight up do a bunch of different rounds, you have to do 128, and that's how it's gonna go.
Looks like we're doing it then.
128.
Full send.
I prefer 8.
I prefer 16, but
I
you
prefer
guys are just
8,
writing me
but
off.
16 would be fun.
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of different ways to go about it, and how you put teams in, what you do with the conference champions, the divisions, and how you align the teams. But one thing is for certain: we need playoff expansion.
This is true.
It is true.
When they said 4 teams, I'm like, you guys are just doing the minimum amount of teams to say that it's a playoff, so people get off your back about making a playoff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's literally the least teams you could have in the playoff. It's, you have less spots than you have power conferences. It's not great. So I guess the consensus here is let's expand the playoffs. There's a bunch of different ways to do it, but college football, please expand the playoff. I would watch it. Everyone would watch it. So let's do it. Spencer Allgood, Easton Nelson. My name is Marco Yurkovich. Thank you so much for joining us for this very interesting discussion about college football and the playoffs and their expansion.
Playoffs.
We're talking about playoffs? So please hit that like button, subscribe, leave a comment down below what you thought about this video. We will see you guys next time.